When you think of Bethesda games, what mechanics come to mind? For me, I think about the open worlds. Picking up way too much shit, weird leveling mechanics, and of course, lockpicking minigames. Yep, that's right, we are talking about lockpicking today, and you chose to be here. Don't worry, it's actually an interesting topic, so let's get started. So lockpicking has been in every major Bethesda title since, well, the beginning. Yep, it's apparently been around all the way back since 1994's The Elder Scrolls Arena. In Arena, it was a simple stat check. The minigame wouldn't come around until Oblivion 12 years later, and has since had only minor changes in both the Fallout series and the Elder Scrolls. In Bethesda's latest game, Starfield, there's an even newer version of this minigame that switched up the mechanic the most since it was first introduced in Oblivion. Now, the issue with this mechanic is that it's pretty horrible to deal with, especially in its most current iteration. We'll be looking at Fallout 4 as an example when talking about this, but rest assured, Starfield and Skyrim also have these exact same issues. In Fallout 4, how lockpicking works is that every lock has a lock level from 0 to 100. There's a graphic. Maybe. There should be a graphic. 0 being the easiest to pick and 100 being the most difficult. At the start of the game, the player is able to unlock novice locks. Those are going to be your lowest level locks. But we'll need the locksmith perk to unlock advanced, expert, and master locks, each level costing another perk point. Now, with the setup, there are no alternatives to this. You can't do things like force open locks, you can't shoot open locked doors, and you can't blow open doors. This makes it so that pretty much every player will unlock these perks in order to avoid missing content. However, the game design can't assume that the player will have these perks, and therefore can't actually lock any content behind pickable locks. It's an incredibly underutilized mechanic. Even the loot found in locked chests and doors are barely any better than what you would find normally. That's why the Bethesda lockpicking mechanic needs a bit of an overhaul. I have a few ideas what should go into this overhaul to really make it something worthwhile. First, we need to talk about the changes that we need to the mechanic itself, before talking about how to expand the player's options with this mechanic, and finish off by talking about how to properly use this mechanic when designing levels and the world as a whole. Hopefully I'll be able to convince some of you that there's a better way to do things, especially with the lockpicking mechanic. In a perfect world, this would somehow get to Bethesda, but that's not gonna happen. Lockpicking in its current iteration needs to change in order to allow it to be a fully featured mechanic, and this might as well be the start of expanding all of Bethesda game mechanics in a similar way. With lockpicking, it's one of the few mechanics that doesn't fully commit to being a skill-based or a stats-based system. It's kind of both. This is true for the combat of these games as well, especially in the Fallout games. With VATS, the player can fully rely on it as a stat-based mechanic. Lockpicking is similar but isn't entirely committed to the idea. You are required to unlock perks, or in earlier games, raise your stats to a specific level, in order to open locks. But then, you must play a minigame to utilize these stats. Our first big change is to rectify this. We are going to allow for both options. One, where you can play the minigame of any lock level as a test of skill, and two, having an option where you can fully rely on your stats. I feel the second option working similar to games like The Outer Worlds or Kenshi, if you ever played that. I highly recommend it if you like Fallout, by the way. The higher your stat, the more likely you are to unlock the lock. For every attempt that you fail, you lose a lockpick. Ideally, for every lockpicking attempt, your lockpicking should increase. This is to mimic practicing a skill in the real world, similar to how it works in Skyrim. I actually really like that system in Skyrim, and I think it's probably the best stat system that we've had in any Bethesda game. So let's go back to that, please. If the player is successful at picking a lock, it'll go up a little bit more than if they had failed it. This increase won't be on the stat itself, but it will be part of a, stat XP bar, similar to what you would see in Skyrim. I don't know why I'm explaining this, but you know what I'm talking about. So I really gotta say that while reading that, it was definitely like a well, no shit kind of thing. So it makes it really difficult to take what I'm trying to say seriously. because it feels like I'm talking about like the most rudimentary like game design thoughts, and that kind of bothers me, right? Like it's 2025 and we don't have these mechanics that should obviously be in these games. Like, what the fuck, Bethesda? Anyways, it just feels like we're taking a massive step backwards with this stuff in the most recent Bethesda games. But well, let's continue, shall we? So with the first change, we have already opened up the game to allow for locks to be placed in the path of the player. Since the player can always unlock them, you don't have to worry about, you know, breaking the story progression. You can just fucking go through them. The player will always be able to unlock any locks, but higher locks may take more lockpicks, and that's just the price of that. I don't think that's the worst idea ever, though, especially in the Bethesda game, where you end up with having like hundreds of lockpicks. Along with this, it's important to allow for other options to go along with this, though. Lockpicking seems to be tied with the player's dexterity, but there should be other options to utilize a player's character's strength, gun skill, and other, you know, tools of that nature, and pretty much any other aspect of the game that you would use to build out your character and flesh them out to the character that you would want them to be. You know, like in an RPG, which these are supposed to be, but whatever. Within Fallout 4, an easy addition would be to allow the player to target locks via VATS. Then they could use their perception level, and possibly a gun skill could determine the likelihood of successfully shooting the lock off. That's not out of the question, it's not a crazy thought, it's something that's been done in other games even. Outside of VATS, they could also do the same thing, not as strong of a test of skill as like a dedicated minigame, and ideally I think you would have a dedicated minigame, but it would get the job done. Like, you would be able to, you know, code that in, and you would be able to do that. Similar things could be added to doors, or even a health system where you can simply destroy the obstacles in your way. This actually already exists in Bethesda games. It's just hardly ever used. You can actually add health to any object in the game, any static, any furniture, and the player can deal damage to these things, and you can have them, you know, break apart. That's already in the game. You wouldn't even have to add anything to that. It's just adding values to the objects. Yeah, how I see this expanded mechanic working would be by assigning health to every type of door, and by diversifying what each door can handle. Some doors may have very strong locks, but are made of like wood, and that would be great for melee characters maybe. You know, they can just be loud and break open the door rather than trying to pick the lock. Others could be very strong steel doors with very weak locks. So these doors might be harder to break down, but a skilled lockpicker or stealth character would be able to pick it easily and get through. Where a strong character wouldn't be able to bash through their way through the door. Wouldn't be able to bash their way through the door. Fumbled that a little bit. Wood doors can be easily destroyed with shotguns or by simply kicking them in. Strong metal doors would require the player to do a lot of damage all at once, maybe via using explosives. Of course, using explosives will, you know, alert your enemies, but maybe you can find another way to not alert your enemies via that. And this idea can be infinitely expanded. You don't have to just stick to these ones. Having locks that react to specific voice, requiring the player to utilize their charisma skill, or having electronically locked doors that could require the player to either hack the lock or try to figure out what the code is for the door, using like investigation, like in D&D. Stuff like that. In a fantasy game setting like the Elder Scrolls, you can even have talking doors that need convincing to be opened. With just a bit of imagination, we can come up with, you know, many more ways that we can expand this. But we have been stuck with the same boring system for so long, I fear that we just kind of accept that this is the way it is. This is how things are supposed to be. And we kind of stopped looking for ways to make them better. And that, that kind of sucks. We should be asking for better and for asking for more, especially from, a billion-dollar company. The last issue that needs addressing is how exactly this mechanic is used within the game. Without addressing this, there's actually no real reason to attempt to try to make this mechanic any better in the first place. What I'm talking about is the reluctance to make the lockpicking skill actually meaningful. Now, I know several ways that this could be implemented, but these ways would require Bethesda to abandon a key aspect of one of the ways they develop their games. They need to be okay with the idea that not every player character will be doing absolutely everything that's possible in a single playthrough. They are absolutely obsessed with this idea. In Skyrim, a single player can be the Thane of Nine Holds, the Speaker of the Dark Brotherhood, the Archmage of a mage college, the leader and a Nightingale of the Thieves Guild, the champion of a pantheon of gods, and of course, the Dragonborn is destined to destroy Alduin. I'm sure I missed a few there also. In Fallout 4, it's a bit better on the faction side, but that's because there's so few in the game. Instead, you are able to be level 10 in every special stat, making you the strongest, most persuasive, hardest to kill, most charming, most intelligent, most agile, and luckiest little special vault dweller to ever exist. You're able to hack every terminal and pick every lock. The greatest of Mary Sue's. In Starfield, you can be the space cowboy, the space cop spy, and most special explorer who is given a brand new ship the second that you meet another space explorer. You get what I'm saying, though. They're so afraid of letting the player just miss out on content that they're not using the things that would make the character's playthrough feel specific to that character. Like, you're not gonna feel very different playing a stealth character versus playing, a guns blazing character. You're still going to be picking locks, you're still going to be hacking, you're still going to be stripping bodies, you're still going to be doing all of that. Bethesda is just too afraid to lock away any content for any of their players, and because of that, there is no reason to replay their games. Without, self-imposed limitations, of course. This can be seen in the simplest of things, such as locks on doors and chests. However, the easy fix is simple. Now that you have all these other options for locks and chests, we can just build these encounters into the type of character that would be using these mechanics. Put a lock onto the air ducts for the stealth character. Put a lock onto the air ducts that the stealthy spy or thief character would want to go through. Put an old busted locked door in front of the room full of close range melee characters or melee enemies so that the badass shotgun wielding vault dweller can kick the door in and go ham. Have the lockpicking level determine how the player should approach them. Let the stealth character find less direct routes and the melee character would want to avoid anyway. It's wild that this isn't how these games are made. So little thought goes into having multiple ways to actually finish their dungeons. It's crazy. They won't even lock armor away that is specific for a stealth character in a locked chest that only a stealth character would be able to get. They should do that kind of thing. It's as a melee character, you're not expecting to be able to get into every chest anyways, right? And it's so just put the things that the melee character wouldn't give a shit about in the chest. Have those things be what those characters would want in the first place. Put armor that the melee character would care about behind a stone wall that they have to tackle their way through. Even saying that out loud makes it seem so very obvious, and I'm baffled that a multi-million-dollar company that has the backing of $1 billion company doesn't do this. It's at this point, offering more examples would just be beating the horse. You understand what I'm asking for. Many of these ideas aren't anything new. I know that. I do think that it's important to still vocalize these ideas though. It's important that we as a community, who are the ones who are supporting these franchises, that our standards for them should grow as their bank accounts do at the very least. This can also help inform any would-be game developer on how they could do something better than Bethesda can. Because clearly Bethesda is unwilling or unable to do these things. Deepening game mechanics rather than simply making a puddle-deep ocean. Lockpicking in Bethesda games should allow the player to engage with it as a skill-based mechanic or a stat-based one. There should be more than just a single mechanic that the player can choose between. And they should be able to use multiple ways to get past small obstacles like this, utilizing all the different ways the player has to diversify their character. Above all, Bethesda should absolutely be using these mechanics in a way that encourages player to build their character around these mechanics and stop letting every character become the world's greatest Mary Sue. It just doesn't feel good. Alright, that's all I really have to say on the matter. This lamp is like 1,000,000,000 degrees, and I'm in this sweater, and it was a mistake. But I wanted to have the continuity of me staying in this sweater, and it's made me so goddamn angry. So I'm turning that lamp off to end this. Okay, so hopefully this is a new format that I end up doing and doing better than I did with this one, but hey, I'm still working on scripts rather than just off the cuff, and I feel like I really just got to get better at doing off the cuff kind of content, because I feel like I would be better at that. Like even this like outro feels better to do than that whole video. But if you did like it, please like, comment, subscribe, do all that cool stuff, because my channel will literally never grow. Like it's like and like every video I try to do something better, and I try to think of ways to improve. And I do put a lot of work and stuff into these. And I do hope that shows. So yeah, if you did enjoy it, do all that cool stuff. I've been rambling now. Alright, go away. Goodbye! Get this monster flavor. It's pretty good. It's not an ad. I'd be fucking crazy if I was sponsored by them with 2,000 subs. Oh.